will try and ease a bit of that investment apprehension about, how much you do need to have set aside to make a realistic start with a business like this.
I want to talk a bit about a hidden cost that doesn't really get much attention when people start to think about how much does it cost to start dropshipping.
With dropshipping, you can be profitable by month 2 if you play your cards right and you really get the business working from day one.
As a business owner, you need to start thinking about the costs that you incur as a business as investments instead of costs.
I started and blew hundreds of pounds of my budget on a Facebook ad campaign, essentially, that was doomed to fail.
Both of us learned that lesson the hard way. I've still got the memories of the feeling that I had when I'd lost that hundreds of pounds. It sounds like you had the same experience.
I mean, you'll need to spend money initially to make money, right? But be smart about where you spend it. Every penny that you save in the beginning can be spent to really increase your return on investment. So use... Welcome to the Dropship Unlocked Podcast, your key to unlocking the secrets of high-ticket dropshipping. I'm Lewis Smith, founder of Dropship Unlocked, and with me is our client success coach, James Eardley. Now, when we're not recording podcast episodes, we're running our own e-commerce businesses and helping aspiring entrepreneurs launch their own high-ticket dropshipping businesses. So if you're ready to learn how to build your own 6 or even 7-figure business, pick up a copy of my book, The Home Turf Advantage, whether you're looking to replace your income or launch a side hustle. I wrote this book as a roadmap to help you launch a low-maintenance, high-profit e-commerce business that gives you the freedom to spend more time with your family, travel the world, and work on your own terms. Ready to join us? Visit htabook.com to get your copy today. Now sit back, relax, and let's unlock your potential with the Dropship Unlocked podcast.
Have you ever wondered how much it actually costs to start a dropshipping business? And we're talking about money, but also time, energy, and some hidden costs that you might not expect. Well, today we're going to cover everything. We're going to give a full breakdown between Lewis and I. How much does it actually cost to start a dropshipping business? And by the end of this episode, you'll know the hidden cost that doesn't get talked about very often when it comes to starting a dropshipping business. So, Lewis, we get this question quite a lot from listeners about how much it costs to get started. Why do you think it's such a pivotal question for newcomers to the dropshipping space?
Yeah, we do. We get this question lots, and I understand why as well, because when we're first starting out in business, we don't yet know what we don't know, right? So if we all had the answers and we knew the exact costs that it would take to start a business and there were no unknowns in our future, then it would be much easier for us all to just plan and to budget accordingly, wouldn't it? But today we'll try and ease a bit of that investment apprehension about, how much you do need to have set aside to make a realistic start with a business like this. And we'll try and break down what you should have prepared before you do venture into launching a dropshipping business, whether this is your first ever business venture, or if you've run businesses before, but maybe you're now adapting to this as a new business model. So today we'll be focusing specifically on the model of dropshipping that we use, which is our Home Turf Advantage model, which, as you know, is high-ticket products being sold from UK suppliers with next-day delivery to UK customers as well. So nice high £100 plus profit per sale as well. So that just to kind of caveat what we go into. But yeah, I mean, when I first started out with this dropshipping, I remember that I had a fear of like what those hidden costs could be. And it's easy to let that fear hold you back because you don't want to dive into something without knowing what's ahead. I totally understand that. It's essential really in this business to understand the financial commitment kind of parameters, what the range of potential costs might be beforehand, and not just for planning, but really just to set realistic expectations so that you know, okay, here's what I'm probably going to have to spend before I start to see a return on investment on that. So it's always good to set aside a budget and try and anticipate certain expenses. So we can go through a list of expenses. We'll give you the exact kind of figures around those today, but give yourself some leeway, because if there's one thing we can be sure about, having coached hundreds of members to start their business using the Home Turf Advantage model, is you will encounter some unforeseen circumstance at some point. It will be at some point in your journey a bit of a rocky road. So we might as well embrace that. And the nice thing is now when we encounter problems, yeah, it might cause a bit of a headache. It might be a slightly frustrating day that we've got to, redo something or pay someone to come in and fix something. But because we've kind of banked up enough money and we have a cash reserve buffer there in the business at all times, it's now just a headache. It's not, financial ruin. It's not that I have to scrap the whole business and give up on my dreams. So the great thing about dropshipping is that when you are starting, it doesn't take huge upfront costs. It's not like you're buying stock and you're importing containers or, you're private labeling. And once you've done it, if there was an error or mistake or a quality issue with the products, then the whole lot has to be scrapped. But someone once told me that in entrepreneurship, you should get the boat as close to the dock as possible before you make the leap. And that's always resonated with me, because trying to start a business with nothing to invest, if you've literally got nothing, you're living complete paycheck to paycheck, you've got no money set aside, that's the equivalent of jumping off the cruise ship in the middle of the sea, right? You're only going to be able to swim so far. You can brute force and hard work and grit and determination, but unless you have a bit of a buffer there will come a point where you will just run out. So if you've got nothing to invest, you're essentially jumping in without a life jacket. And we don't want to put anyone in our Dropship Unlocked community in that position. So if you're not ready for our high level mentorship program, that's totally okay. That's fine. That's why we do the podcast. And that's also why I recently wrote a book called The Home Turf Advantage, which for the price of a couple of coffees, you could pick up a copy of today. And that guides you through everything. I've put all of our program into 140 value-packed pages there. And obviously that would be the version that you'd read and go through yourself. If you wanted our help to implement that stuff with the mentorship at a later date, then you can still apply for our masterclass program where we would hold your hand every step of the way. But those are the initial considerations I'd think about when getting started. Don't do it before you're ready.
Yeah, some good advice there. I think knowing that you need to have some investment is a sound advice. With any business, I think dropshipping is often advertised as a business that you can start with £0 or like a £5 budget. But like any other business, there's always going to be some capital that's required. And obviously, the more capital you have, the more leeway you've got as well when you're first getting up and running. But at the same time, dropshipping has absolutely got one of the biggest benefits of starting this business. And one of the reasons I chose to start dropshipping is the fact that it has such lower upfront costs than other businesses. You don't need tens of thousands to get started. So when you do first get started, Lewis, let's start to break down what are some of the costs that people will incur when they first get started in a dropshipping business.
Yeah, so the primary one, which you've all probably heard of as well, is the platform on which you host your business on. We use and recommend Shopify. We have a deal with them where it's £3 for your first 3 months. So really low cost way of trying it. To get that, you can go to dropshipunlocked.com/Shopify. We'll add all these links into the show notes below this video or this episode if you need them. But when I first started, I knew that I didn't want to overthink the platform that I wanted to build my business on, because I just jumped straight into Shopify because I'd heard enough good things about it that I thought, okay, there might be something out there that ticks a few more boxes than Shopify and maybe it has a few more pros and whatever. But I was aware of this paradox of choice concept explained in the book by Barry Schwartz, The Paradox of Choice. And I'm really glad that I did, because if you're not familiar with the paradox of choice as an idea, it's the idea that the more choices that you have seems to suggest that you have more freedom and more autonomy because of all those choices. But actually, they only lead to greater dissatisfaction and regret and that paralysis in decision making later, because you had so many choices that you can't help but second guess the one that you did make. So I was almost like, I don't want to know the other options, because this one, if it's good enough for brands like Gymshark, if it's good enough for these world leading e-commerce brands, I'm happy to use it. So yeah, my advice is that because your platform is your storefront, there will be fees associated with it. They're very minimal if you use the link that we provided there, £3 for the first 3 months of trying it. And you kind of have to think of it like you're renting a prime location in a shopping center, right? Because that's the way, like, your storefront is going to be the location on which your store is built. So that's the first one. Very cheap, very reasonable. The next would be Google Workspace. So we use that for like our emails, our storage, our Google Drive. We have all of our files hosted on there. It comes with all of the other tools that are part of Google Workspace. That's something like £9 per month. So very minimal. You'd need a website domain. So once you just decide on the domain, so the .com or .co.uk website address, that's usually about £10 per year, something like that. And one of the research tools that we use when we're researching which products to sell is a tool called Keywords Everywhere. That's about £10, I think, for thousands of keyword searches as well. And then you might need extra Shopify apps, something like maybe a cookie policy generator, which might set you back £20 or something like that. But we're not talking about, huge upfront costs here. the dropshipping startup costs are much lower than traditional business models. If you think about, imagine contrasting this to opening up a franchise, right? A Costa Coffee or a Subway franchise or something, or going and leasing commercial space to then go and buy equipment or buy the office furniture, and the hiring a reception team and having everyone brought in and all the employee overhead costs. You're looking at hundreds of thousands of pounds of investment, probably in debt, because you probably have to finance all that stuff before you even make a penny in profit, right? So you have to make a lot of profit before you even break even on those overhead costs. With dropshipping, you can be profitable by month 2 if you play your cards right and you really get the business working from day one. So I think that's the thing. If you have a proven process and you follow a plan and it's very intentional and you have those tools in place, you're basically up and running and you can start trading, making sales and making profit back very, very quickly.
So all of those tools you mentioned there, I think it totals probably less than £50 per month to actually get this running. Actually, a lot less when you first get started with that really cheap trial that Shopify gives for £3 a month. So for less than £50 a month, we've got a prime storefront location. We've got all of the tools you need in terms of handling customer queries. You can keep all of your customer data. You can handle all of your orders for such a low cost. And that's why dropshipping is talked about as such a low startup cost business. So that's the sort of startup costs. What sort of costs need to be considered when it comes to the day-to-day operation of a business?
Yeah, when you first start, and certainly when I first started, you can just run the thing yourself. You don't need these huge kind of other extra costs to go on there. You don't really need a team when you first start. I used to just have my company phone line go straight to a voicemail where I would say, please leave your email address and let me know what your question is. Then I'd have the app that we use transcribe the voicemails into text, send them to me via email, so that at the end of the day, I could just go through them and batch replies to every single person. And if there was somebody who didn't leave their email or who I needed to speak with, then yeah, of course, I'd just call them back later in the day. But I managed expectations, and that way there are no real overhead costs other than the ones we talked about earlier. It is just me. It's very simple. And in the UK, the best app that I've found that can do that from both phone app, like using on your smartphone and also on laptop or desktop, is called Circle Loop, which again, you can try for free. We've partnered with them to provide a free trial, which is at dropshipunlocked.com/circle. We'll put the link to that below in the show notes as well. But I think that's about £6 per month after the free trial, or £18 per month for their unlimited plan, I believe, but very worthwhile. And you will be getting you answer a few phone calls, make a few high ticket sales per month, and that pales into insignificance. That's a drop in the ocean of the profit that you'll be bringing through from that, having that phone line there. So well worth having. I think you kind of have to think of the operational costs as like the backbone of your business. They ensure that the business runs smoothly day to day, but you can, of course, start lean. You don't need to go and buy the best facilities, the best tools, like the best of everything. Just use cost-effective tools to start with. Consider maybe down the line, once you get to the point where you have enough profit, maybe that's when you hire a part-time VA initially, and someone who just works a few hours per day for you. And then eventually maybe they could transition to become your full-time virtual assistant when you're able to really reinvest those profits. But yeah, with those tools, I think rather than viewing them as costs, it's better to think of them as like, a new smartphone. You go and buy a new smartphone. Yeah, of course, there's the initial cost of buying it. There's the contract fee, the app purchases, the accessories that you buy, etc. But once you have it, think of what that smartphone does. It's like an enabler for your life. It makes your life so much easier. It's like everything you do is like centered around this amazing piece of technology. So it's the same thing. You want to get the foundational pieces of tech in place for a business like this to enable you to then just step back from it and allow the business to run. So a few of those costs up front, but once they're in place, you really don't have to think about them.
And I think you touched on there the key when it comes to considering these startup costs. As a business owner, you need to start thinking about the costs that you incur as a business as investments instead of costs. So think about the return that you get for each of these investments that you make into your phone line, into Shopify. If you, as Lewis said, if you get one sale per month through the phone, for that £18 a month cost for Circle Loop, you've made a £400 profit order, and suddenly that Circle Loop investment is not a cost at all. It's made you, it's actually allowed you to make that profit. So yeah, think about them as investments, and that's a great breakdown that you've given us there, Lewis. That's literally everything. I think people try and overcomplicate it sometimes by thinking about paid Shopify themes or adding new apps to make every, all singing, all dancing store from the start. But everything you've mentioned there will get you off the line, up and running. And I followed all of that advice and was generating tens of thousands in revenue every month without any extra costs. But of course, that's all of the operational costs. But no business is going to thrive and generate sales without marketing. So I want to touch on now, what sort of budget and what sort of investment would you recommend people make when it comes to marketing their store?
Yeah, well, I can speak from experience on this one because I certainly made all the mistakes when it comes to marketing when I first jumped in. I think I set up a Facebook ads campaign in the way that I saw on some YouTube video, and I just thought, okay, well, they'll guide me through it. That'll be fine. That's the way I'll make my sales. Not to mention I'd picked the complete wrong products when I first started. I hadn't validated my niche, but that's by the by. That's separate. So I started and blew hundreds of pounds of my budget on a Facebook ad campaign, essentially, that was doomed to fail. When I look at it now, I think, of course, it was doomed to fail. Not to mention the products that I was trying to sell were cheap products from China and were never going to convert at a rate that was going to be profitable, not to mention all the other issues that would cause. But I didn't make a single sale initially, like for the first few weeks of running them. I think after a while I did make one or two sales and they both ended up in refunds. They were both problematic. And it was a very costly lesson for me on the importance of understanding marketing. So I'd say that marketing is essential because you want a machined kind of conveyor belt style business where you've constantly got more customers coming through the door and you build this system, but you need to be able to bring those customers in consistently, reliably, and not to mention profitably as well. You need your ad campaigns to be acquiring new customers at a cost that is less than the profit that you make on each of them. Otherwise, you're out of business. So whilst marketing is an essential, it's also a real kind of skill set, and you need to budget not just for ads, but I would actually put the majority of my budget when I start into learning ads, like learning what works for the model that I'm using, the specific model, not just like generic Facebook ad training that you might find on YouTube like I did. Don't make that same mistake. I think start out with small budgets, analyze the results that you're getting. Google Ads offers fantastic insights for beginners, and just choose a budget that suits you to start with. I mean, we recommend starting at about £30 per day once you're up and running. And by the way, we would only suggest doing that once you have 4 or 5 brands signed, once you've validated your niche products, once you have your minimum site built. Like there's a stage, and it's week 5 of our program, where we would advise you to even think about beginning to run ads. But yeah, if I was starting fresh into this business model now and I had never done it before, I think instead of reserving all of the savings that I had and thinking, okay, that's my ad budget, I'd actually be more focused on thinking, where can I invest here to shortcut the learning curve and avoid the costly mistakes to ensure that the money that I do then invest later, whether that's in ads or in software or in products, goes a lot further. And I think that's it's a real like mental reframe that you have to go through, because you'd assume, I have this pot of money, I just want to spend it on ads. But it's like if you have an old car and you say, no, I've got this old car and it keeps breaking down, well, what do? Just keep pouring money into it, like keep paying to have it repaired. It's really inefficient with fuel. Like there becomes a point where you're like, actually, I'd be better here just investing in a different car that then doesn't take so much going forwards. And it's the same thing. If you can invest in yourself and learning the right strategy, the ad budget you have will go so much further, which will make you more profit, which you can then reinvest back into ads in a more efficient cycle. It's like having the new efficient driving car, right? So yeah, that way you're going to save money in the long run. You'll forever be able to launch and scale profitable ad campaigns, because once you have those skills, no one can take them away from you. And the specific model that we suggest is start off using Google Ads. They're the ads that convert the best in terms of high search intent. Then think about running meta ads. So we set up meta retargeting ads on Facebook and Instagram later. And we break all this down, by the way, in hours of over-the-shoulder, step-by-step, click-by-click tutorials in week 5 of our masterclass program. So we can link that below in the show notes too, James, if that's something that you think would be helpful.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that's down there, because both of us learned that lesson the hard way. I've still got the memories of the feeling that I had when I'd lost that hundreds of pounds. It sounds like you had the same experience. It's not a nice feeling at all. And what I tried to do was just the budget that I did have to invest in starting a business. Like you said, I threw that straight into marketing without really knowing what I was doing and where that money was going. And instead, eventually I realized that what I need to do is put the first investment that I have, some savings, into learning the marketing. And then when I then go to reinvest the budget that I've got into ads, that investment is going to be so much better spent, because I know what I'm doing with the investment, and I know what products to generate sales for. So yeah, it's a learning curve, I think, that we've been through, and hopefully by sharing this, it will stop other people from seeing that they've got like £500 a month to spend on ads and losing that and wasting that on poor quality products until they find a winner. So hopefully this will prevent that. So I want to talk a bit about a hidden cost that doesn't really get much attention when people start to think about how much does it cost to start dropshipping. What do you think is the largest hidden cost that isn't talked about?
Well, it's probably the ignorance cost that I certainly paid when I first started. And that relates to me not having been educated or, trying to figure things out as I went initially. It's, a few weeks ago, I took my family on holiday to Greece for a good friend's wedding. And I remember when we got there, we rented a car and we're driving around. Now, luckily, I had my phone, right? And I had data on it so I could use Google Maps and direct us to this villa that was really like remote. It was out in the sticks. There were some seriously treacherous roads on that drive and it was getting dark. It was like the sun had pretty much set. It was dark and we were driving up like these, I don't know if you've ever driven in Greece, but these like cliff face, curving, rocky roads where there's no barrier to the side. Like if you drive that car off, the car is rolling down hundreds of feet of a drop down the mountain. And there were times where I was like halfway up this kind of gritty road and I looked back in the mirrors, can't see anything. It's just pitch black. And I thought, I don't know what to do here if this is the wrong road. Like I can't reverse down this road. I am stuck. I'm committed to this path. If I didn't have my sat nav there telling me, hey, just around the corner, you will get to a point where like it all opens up again and you will be in the right place. I thought, well, there's no way I could reverse back. So if I hadn't had that phone, I would have been in serious trouble. And that was like the map, right? Directing me exactly where to go. And it's like that when you're starting out in business. If you haven't yet been in the business model that you're thinking of using the home turf advantage, without that guide, that Google Maps showing you the way, you find yourself halfway up a mountain on some treacherous Greek mountainous road, dangerously lost, and it's getting dark and you don't know whether to continue. That's the worst part. You don't even know, should I continue down this path or am I going to get even more stuck, or do I try and reverse and go back? Like you're completely lost and it's horrible. So investing in my education up front saved me tens of thousands of pounds, probably hundreds of thousands of pounds, if I'm honest, over the long run. And it's that wasted ad spend, the wasted platform fees, or not to mention like just not even implementing the right strategy. Like I said from the beginning, just not validating the right market or knowing that if the products that I was thinking of selling would even sell, and if I uploaded them to my site, why are they not converting into sales? Why are people not buying them? What do I do if my ad campaign, I'm spending money, but it's not working? Why? I have all these questions, but I don't have a guide. All of these things that I learned eventually became crucial to my success when I invested in my own education. And if I'd chosen not to actually invest in myself to do that and shorten the learning curve, I'd have likely failed and given up a long time ago because I'd have thought, well, it doesn't work and I don't know why and I can't figure out why, so I'll just give up. And unfortunately, we see so many people do that who never make that initial leap. So it's always good to, I think, just make sure that you have a clear path that you can follow. So you have the sat nav in your hand and the route you're on is working and it's worked for other people and therefore you are, right? Because there are some really lonely times in entrepreneurship. So get around other people who are on that same journey as you. It really does help. The other thing I'd say is have a miscellaneous budget. So make sure that you just kind of set money aside to, whether it's like processing fees or unexpected delivery fees. If somebody lives in a place where it's a bit more expensive to deliver a product, just make sure you have a bit of a pot of money there to cover those kinds of things. And then the last thing is just stay informed, stay connected to your industry. Forums, communities, they can all be a great resource. In fact, we've got one that you can get invited to just as a bonus for picking up a copy of my Home Turf Advantage book. So if you head to htabook.com and buy a copy of that book there, you could join hundreds of other entrepreneurs who are also just getting started in our Launchpad community as well.
Yeah, the Launchpad community has been a great success. And for anyone that's starting with a lower budget, I think it's the perfect place to start. You can access the book with the full step-by-step guide, and you've got an invite into a community there full of other aspiring dropshipping entrepreneurs. And the success stories we see in there are fantastic. But I'm so glad you highlighted that ignorance cost. And I love the way that you phrased it as an ignorance cost, because I guess all of those mistakes I made and the money that I lost, I thought I was spending Facebook ads, but when you rephrase it, what I was actually paying was the ignorance cost that I had to pay because I didn't have the education to allow me to make the right decisions in terms of a marketing campaign, in terms of which products to sell, in terms of what my store should look like. All of those different questions, what that led to is me having to pay an ignorance cost. And people have to pay it until they pick up the right information in terms of knowing how to run an ad campaign, which products to sell, that sort of thing. So that helps me to look back at that mistake and that hundreds of pounds that we both lost on the first stores that we made as an ignorance cost instead of a big failure. We had to pay that, and now we're able to get over that with the right training, of course, and the right communities around us. So for all aspiring entrepreneurs listening, Lewis, how would you suggest that people can keep their costs down to make sure that we're maximizing the profits that we generate from a dropshipping business?
Yeah, there are lots of ways you can keep your costs down. And there are some ways that I'd suggest don't worry too much about keeping the cost down. For example, I tried to DIY my logo and branding when I first started. And I very quickly realized I'm not a professional logo designer or branding expert because it looked terrible. And so I realized the value of getting professional help. Now, whether that's a freelancer through Fiverr or Upwork to help create you a logo for £20, or whether it's just using one of the AI tools that now exist to help you create an amazingly branded website design and theme and logo, just at the click of a button. There really is no excuse now. But stuff like that, I would advise investing cost effectively in at the beginning, just because it's going to make your brand stand out, and it's not going to be the thing and the reason why customers don't purchase from you. There's like a threshold of trust. If you design something that looks like it was created on Microsoft Paint, and it's like I did, and it's terrible, then as soon as customers arrive to the website, that could be the thing that drops your conversion rate because it just looks super unprofessional and people aren't going to buy. But you don't need to go and hire a branding agency and pay them millions of pounds to make an incredible brand, because that's just not necessary. There's a trust threshold. And as soon as you've paid a professional or used an AI tool to get past that and to create something that looks passable and is good and you can be proud of, don't think about it again. Don't worry about it until maybe you're in the business and you're making a few £100,000 per month in sales with the business. And you think, yeah, maybe I'll now invest £5,000 in having a complete branding overhaul redesign, something like that. See what I mean? It's like use the money you've accumulated within the business later to reinvest when maybe it makes a marginal difference. But to start with, 80% of the trust will just be achieved by getting a decent logo from a freelancer on Fiverr or Upwork. So go that way would be my opinion. I mean, you'll need to spend money initially to make money, right? But be smart about where you spend it. Every penny that you save in the beginning can be spent to really increase your return on investment. So use freelancing platforms, go for free trials of software. We've linked loads of them below this video that you can basically try most of them either for free or for a couple of pounds. And always try and monitor your ad spend versus your conversions. Look at your cost per sale, look at your conversion value over cost, your return on ad spend. Really keep a close eye on those things and your margins with your suppliers to ensure that you're getting that ROI and that you're happy with it, and you can scale up gradually. Don't try and scale too quickly by blasting money on ads, eating up all your profit and then suddenly running out of cash. It's the long game. That's what we want to win. And that return on investment typically becomes visible once you've refined your strategies, your ad campaigns are optimized. And then, in a few months' time, you can accumulate 6 months worth of operating profits or operating expenses, from the profit you've accumulated. Keep that in the business as your buffer and you're good. Like I said earlier, those problems or what would have been emergency situations before now become minor headaches because you have the cash there to see them through and to fix them.
Yeah, so staying lean is definitely going to be the key when you first get started. Only taking on the right tools that you need, the essentials to get up and running, and focus on maximizing the budget that you can put into Google Ads, and you'll get your return that way. And you can be profitable very, very early on with dropshipping compared to a lot of other business models. So you can start with very low amount of money really with dropshipping. I think the more you have, and especially when you're going into a high ticket business model, the better it gives you that leeway. It also allows you to invest in training that's going to keep your costs right down when you do start advertising. And that's the way that we've both went and would, I guess, recommend for everyone else when they want to get started with an e-commerce business. So, Lewis, to finish the episode, this topic, before we move on to some questions from listeners, how would you advise that people get started if the main thing that's holding them back right now is that they're not sure how much it's going to cost?
Yeah, so to avoid the unknowns or the unknown unknowns, as we said at the beginning of the episode, the best way is just follow a proven system. Follow the Google Maps. That way you will avoid surprises and you can keep learning this way as you go. That way you will steer clear of those unexpected costs as much as possible. There will be some down the road, but you have cash there to be able to deal with them as and when they come because you heeded the advice in the beginning and you didn't try to just reinvent the wheel and figure it out from some YouTube video like I did. So if you want a step-by-step guide on how to build your dropshipping business right from scratch, then you can pick up a copy of my book, The Home Turf Advantage, from htabook.com. This will provide you with the exact steps that I took that you can implement within 6 weeks to get up and running. Just a quick heads up, if you'd like to share your questions, stories, successes, or challenges, you can email us directly at podcast@dropshipunlocked.com. And you never know, we might even feature you on the next podcast episode.
Also, if you want access to today's show notes or any of the resources we've mentioned in the episode today, then head over to dropshipunlocked.com/podcast. We also have a small favour to ask of you. If you enjoyed the show so far, you could take a minute to leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice.
You wouldn't believe how much your reviews help us grow the podcast. We'll even read out some of our favourites on the next episode. So if you want to be featured on the show, please do go ahead and leave us a review today. Thanks so much for your support. We really couldn't do it without you, and we absolutely love hearing what you think of the podcast.
So now let's answer a question that's come in from a listener of the podcast, and this question has come in from Sarah. So remember, if you want to ask a question that we'll answer on a podcast episode soon, all you need to do is email us. It's podcast@dropshipunlocked.com. Or alternatively, you can comment underneath the YouTube video version of the podcast, and that's exactly what Sarah has done to get her question in. So I'll read the question out for you, Lewis. So Sarah has asked, how do you choose non-saturated products/brands?
Thank you for your question, Sarah. So when you're choosing products or brands, it's crucial to select the ones that aren't oversaturated, as you say, but you want to make sure that they do have a at least stable or ideally growing demand, right? So here's a quick rundown of how we approach this. So I'm going to move quickly and go through everything here. So you might want to listen to this on half speed, but I'll break it down for you. So first thing, we validate the search demand. So we'd use tools like Keywords Everywhere to ensure that there is enough substantial search interest in the niche or products before we proceed. If there's not, we don't want to be in that market. Then we'd look at Google Trends to try and figure out, is it stable? Ideally, something that's trending upwards, but certainly not something that's peaked and is on the way down. We don't want to be in a trending market that's just a flash in the pan. We want to know growing interest or at least stable demand. Next thing we'd look at is price point of products. We want to make sure that the products we're going for are aimed at £300 plus to maximize that profitability. If we can make £100 profit per sale at a 30% margin, that's incredible. We only need a few sales per day and we've replaced our income. Next thing, looking at pricing and stability across the different retailers like us. So we're looking to see that the pricing of products in this niche is stable and avoiding those unnecessary complications that we will get down the line where we're not the cheapest and everyone buys from the cheapest. So we don't want to be in a race to the bottom. We want to make sure that we're not in a really difficult customer service related industry, that we prefer products that don't need loads of customer service. We want to keep operations smooth, keep it simple. The last thing is we want to find direct competitors. So finding at least 3 competitors who are also dropshipping and making sure that we know that this niche is viable. Then we're looking at brand willingness. We want to make sure that the brands that we're finding that are selling these products and supplying us are open and willing to dropship as well. If you go through all of those criteria, you don't need to worry about market saturation because you've already validated that there's enough search demand and it's stable and it's not trending, that you will have a long-term business there, assuming the demand doesn't just, drop off a cliff. So yeah, seeing competition generally as a positive indicator, I think it means that there's money to be made. You don't want to be in a market that's just got no competition. The brief steps that I've gone through above are what we would initially look at. But if you're interested in the detailed step-by-step walkthrough of the entire process, Sarah, then check out my book, The Home Turf Advantage, at htabook.com. It's packed with 140 pages of value where I guide you through each of the points that I've just gone through in it much more detail so that you can meticulously plan each phase of choosing the right niche, getting your site up and running, signing your suppliers, running ads, and really stepping back once you have a business that runs itself.
Perfect. Nothing more to add to that, Lewis. I think you've ran through everything there in terms of how to pick products that aren't oversaturated in a niche that's not too competitive. So loads for people to chew on there. Hopefully people have sped us up back from half speed. It tends to sound like you're like a couple of whales speaking. Maybe you flicked over to Blue Planet by accident or something. So yeah, we'll flip back into normal speed to highlight a recent review for the podcast that we've had from Steve. And the way Steve has let us know about his thoughts on the podcast is by letting us know actually in the Dropship Unlocked Launchpad community that we've mentioned a couple of times today. So he has purchased the book, your book, Home Turf Advantage. And so in that community, he let us know that he's listened to the recent podcast we did about what dropshipping gurus won't tell you. He listened to that twice now, and he loves the reality check from Lewis and James for what it takes. And he said it's refreshing honesty. So thank you very much, Steve, for your kind review.
Thank you so much for your review, Steve. Really appreciate that. And glad to hear that you're enjoying the podcast. And we could probably link that episode below as well in the notes, can't we, if anybody else is interested and hasn't already watched or listened to that episode. Do you want to tell us what you think of the podcast? It's easy. Give us a review on your favorite podcast app, or if you love YouTube, leave us a comment on our video. Your thoughts might even be in our next show. Before we say goodbye for now, think about sharing this episode with a friend or family member. Maybe you know someone who's really into business ideas. Share this with them. By doing this, we're not just sharing tips, but we're building a community of people who think the same way. So be a part of this growing community by sharing this episode today.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast. We hope you found the discussion both inspiring and entertaining.
If you're ready to begin your own high-ticket dropshipping journey, then here's what to do next. I've taken all of the years of my own experience, both in running my e-commerce businesses and teaching hundreds of others how to do the same, and I've condensed it all into my book, The Home Turf Advantage. It's your comprehensive guide designed to help you create your own e-commerce business. And you can grab your copy today at htabook.com.
Stay connected by subscribing to the podcast. This way you'll never miss an episode packed with valuable insights. And if you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review. Your feedback motivates us, and we love sharing our favourite reviews on future episodes.
And thank you for deciding to spend your time with us today. We really appreciate you, and we look forward to sharing more high-ticket dropshipping insights with you on our next episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast.